One of my favorite scales for soloing in rock is Minor Hexatonic, which is a 6-note scale, as its name implies. It's very similar to Minor Pentatonic, except you're adding the 2nd or 9th, and has a kind of a dark, serious quality. It's great for creating like a pensive, reflective mood. And if you use some string bends, it has like a nice, sexy sound, good for like a steamy love scene midway through an action movie or something. So in this lesson, I'd like to show you some cool things you can do with it, and 2 different ways to theoretically analyze it, break it down. And we'll use the key of E minor because that is the guitar key. So here we go. So in the key of E minor, if we start off with this E minor chord, and then we go to D major, and then another inversion of E minor, another inversion of D major, E minor, D major, E minor. That spells the scale. You can keep going. And you come back down. That's E minor hexatonic. It's just E minor, D major, E minor, D major. And you automatically have some cool harmonies built into that. The melody by itself is just, if you just play those triads but only pick the top note, you get. And if you pick any 2 of those 3 strings, you get some sweet, sadly sweet harmonies. Say if I just pick the B and E strings together. That's kind of a template for creating, harmonized leads with 2 lead guitars, right? And then if you pick just the G string and the high E string notes together, you get a more open sound that uses 6th and 5th intervals. And then you could just pick the G and B strings. Add some vibrato and some finger slides. So like I said, you have a template for creating harmonized leads. You could figure out different positions, but just go back to that, for the notes. Another useful resource, you can do the same thing on the D, G, and B strings. Here's an E minor triad, D major triad, E minor. Just keep going, leapfrogging up the neck. Come back down. Very useful. And so the scale by itself, single notes, would be just on the D string. And then you could play just 2 strings at a time. Say the D and the G strings. And say the D and the B string. Get a more open sound, right? And I showed you before the G and the B, we did that with the first string set. So there's a neat template for creating leads. And the other way to think of E minor hexatonic is, as I said earlier, take E minor pentatonic, and you're going to add the 2nd or the 9th, F sharp. If you do that in every octave, so you took this, and you added 1 note, F sharp, and you get. And what's neat about the hexatonic scale is it has 6 notes, which is an even number, and that works out well rhythmically for sextuplets or 16th note triplets or 16th notes or 8th notes. The 5 and 7 note scales, when you think about it, it's kind of weird. You're fitting like a square peg into a round hole trying to make those scales work rhythmically. So hexatonics have a very neat advantage in that respect. Okay, here are a bunch of patterns for E minor hexatonic. I'm basically going to take all the E minor pentatonic boxes that you hopefully know by now and add F sharp in each octave. So we have a first one like this. And then we have. And then. And then. That's a good one because it's nice and compact, right? There's no big stretches there. And then. And finally. You'll find that some of these are a little more useful than others. You know, the more compact shapes and the ones that don't rely too much on the pinky, because the pinky can be, you know, unreliable. And each one has offers its own possibilities for hammering on and pulling off as well. Okay, here are some cool things you can do with E minor hexatonic. This example is an alternate picking run that works out well because I've arranged the string crosses so that you're not doing any of that hideous inside the strings picking. It's all outside the strings picking. So here it is, 16th note, rolling run, played to a kick and beat. Here we go. Okay, so I'm taking this shape here. You could just do that, just run that up and down, right? That's this position I showed you earlier. Remember, as I said, sometimes you can just use a fragment across a more narrow group of strings, you know, and then not have to play it across all 6 strings, right? So we're playing E minor. See that string cross? It's advantageous for the pick, right? I mean, you still have to work. Nothing's free, right? But it's not like some weird thing where, say, if you start an upstroke, you went, which happens a lot of times when you do these 3 notes per string scale patterns. Most people don't even notice this, but every other string cross, you have that difficult. But here you don't have that. You're going down, up, down, up. So that's even more advantageous. Okay, you're just kind of rolling across that. And then, so you're taking a short idea and repeating it and then making it into a longer run. And you could try doing that in different positions, you know. You do it down here. And then, you know, take it to other keys. Say if I want to take that to A minor. Or try this. And then go to D minor. just move it around, find different places in the neck to have that same shape where it just kind of lives on other string groups. Here's another example that's rather different. Okay, that was more like a shreddy type of picking thing. This is inspired by Pink Floyd's David Gilmour, the way he uses these wailing bends. I mentioned earlier that this scale is very effective when you use little half-step bends and emphasize the ninth, in this case, F sharp. So here's an example inspired by Gilmour, specifically the intro to Shine On You Crazy Diamond, that's in the key of G minor. This is in the key of E minor, but it has the same kind of feel, and I'm using Gilmour's trademark slippery bends and slides and hammer-ons and shakes, vibratos. So here it is. Okay, I started off with a muted rake. I'm kind of actually hitting the harmonic here at 12th fret, muting the D, G, and B strings with the underside of my second finger, and then fretting that top note. So that's a sweep, a bluesy sweep or a rake. Go from E to F sharp to G, and then a nice bend. See, I'm emphasizing the ninth or second F sharp, bending up to the third, to the minor third. Those half-step bends are really ideal for putting vibrato because there's not that much tension, not as much tension as a whole step bend, and it just sounds really, really sexy. Okay, as a pull-off. And a whole step bend and some vibrato. The B string, by the way, is easier to bend than the high E because there's less tension on it. Its thickness relative to its pitch it's a different ratio than the high E string. I'm using this E minor pentatonic box, right? Pull off, and then sliding down to that ninth. Remember, this is the shape I showed you earlier. The whole shape would be. So. And using another slide. Slides are expressive, right? They're like bends and hammer-ons. Vibrato. I'm pushing up. To me, I have more control over the speed of the vibrato when I push up. Obviously, you can't push up on the low E strings, you'll fall off the neck, but most of the time I'll do that. And then another slide into this note. I'm going straight up the E minor pentatonic scale here. Right into a 1.5 step bend. That's a Gilmour signature. Notice I'm using 1, 2, 3 fingers to help support that bend. Sometimes it's good to keep it pentatonic and just use that F sharp note, which would make it hexatonic. Use it sparingly. Right there I did, because I bent from E up to F sharp. There's F sharp again. Pre-bend. Now give it a little bit of shake on that. Very expressive.